I just returned from my European backpacking trip, and in this video, I'm gonna break down exactly how much money I spent. I'll also provide budgeting tips on how you can save money on your trip. I broke my expenses up into 5 categories, being travel, food, accommodation, experiences, and other. It's no secret that travel is gonna be one of your largest expenses. Among these, flights will likely be your biggest cost. I went on 6 flights and spent $600 or 560 euros. I purchased my 3 major flights all together and flew TAP Air Portugal, getting me from Chicago to Lisbon, Lisbon to Rome, and Paris back to Chicago. In total, this cost me $468. This airfare was so cheap because A, I booked these flights 9 months in advance, and B, I went on the shoulder season. I flew into Lisbon in late February and I flew out of Paris in early May. I also spent $87 for a round trip flight from Rome to Athens and $50 for a flight from Bari, Italy to Dubrovnik, Croatia. My next major travel expense was the Eurail pass. I paid $369 for the 10-day and 2-month pass, which gave me 10 travel days on any train. I also paid an additional $43 on train reservations for my pass. Altogether, this cost me $411.89. I'd recommend checking the individual train fares for each of your desired destinations before committing to a pass. Personally, opting for this pass saved me a couple $100. Plus, it's incredibly convenient and it offers you a lot of flexibility. You can cancel a travel day with ease right up until midnight. I also spent $350 on other major travel. This included some train rides that I booked separately from my pass, day trip travel, and ferries from Athens to the Greek islands. Finally, I spent $240 on public transit, meaning subways, buses, and trams. I tried to do as much walking as possible, but sometimes I just had to use the public transit. You're not gonna walk an hour with a 25-pound bag on your back. Altogether, travel cost me $1,600 or 1,490 euros, which divided over the course of my 70-day trip cost me $23 a day or 21 euros and 26 cents. If you're willing to spend a significant amount of time strategizing your travel, you can travel affordably and explore numerous destinations. The next expense category is food. First, I spent $670 on groceries. This included food that I would prepare for dinner and food for lunches. A lot of the times I would go into supermarkets and grab some meat and cheese for lunch. I cooked about 25% of my dinners. For me, it just wasn't sustainable to cook every single night. There were many days where I came back to the hostel exhausted from a day of sightseeing, so I would just eat out. But eating out is considerably more expensive. In total, I spent $1,700 on eating out, which includes sit-down restaurants, fast casual restaurants, and street food. I believe that part of the travel experience is eating the local foods and that you should try the cuisine in each new place that you visit. In total, food cost me $2,440 or 2,260 euros, which breaks down into $35 or 32 euros a day. So yeah, I spent a lot of money on food, but I also eat a lot more food than the average backpacker. I'm 6 foot and I weigh 185 pounds and I worked out almost every day and I averaged about 20,000 steps per day. There are many days where I burned 4,000 plus calories. So yeah, I think you could get away with spending a bit less on food. But honestly, a lot of the time, street food costs about the same as cooking your own food, usually about 10 euros a meal. I don't think it's sustainable to cook more than 25% of your meals if you're doing as much walking or sightseeing as I did. But obviously, if you cook more of your own meals or eat a bit more street food, you could save a bit of money in this category. The next category is accommodation. About 80% of the time I stayed in hostel dorm rooms and the other 20% of the time was Airbnbs. Staying in hostel dorm rooms will definitely be an adjustment at first, but you'll get used to it pretty fast. I also only stayed in Airbnbs when I had someone else to split the cost with, and when that split cost was cheaper than staying in a hostel. Overall, I spent $1,700 on accommodation, which comes out to $24.45 or 22 euros and 64 cents a night. I also broke down the average cost of accommodation by country. You should note though that for Slovenia, Hungary, Austria, and Czechia, I only stayed in one city, so the prices may not be a great representation of how much that country costs. So yeah, accommodation in Europe is not crazy expensive by any means, especially if you can go in the off season or the shoulder season like I did. My recommendation would be to book out hostels in advance for cities that have limited options. You may also want to book hostels in advance for busy cities in peak tourist times, but for busy cities with more options, you could wait until just a few days prior. Also, if you book through Hostelworld, you could pay a bit extra for free cancellation, which will allow you to cancel your room 3 days prior if you find something cheaper or if the price drops elsewhere. I also think that staying in hostels while solo traveling is imperative because A, you can't split the cost of an Airbnb with someone else, and B, you'll meet so many cool, like-minded people. My next cost category is experiences. I spent $300 on excursions and activities. For instance, the entry fee for going into a castle or a church. I did a wine tour at the beginning of my trip when I was in Portugal, but outside of that, didn't do any tours. I'm just not a really big tour guy, so that was an easy thing not to spend money on. I also spent $46 on souvenirs like bracelets and rings and shirts, which puts us at $345 or 320 euros, which breaks down into $4.93 or 4 euros and 57 cents per day for experiences. Finally, we have the other category. The first thing I put in this category was my travel insurance. I got my travel insurance through World Nomads, and it covered me for health insurance, trip cancellation, and lost luggage or damaged items. It cost me $262 for my 70 days and 11 countries. Fortunately, I didn't need to use my insurance, but I do think it's crucial to have because if you were to get seriously injured, that would leave you in a really tough spot in a foreign country. My next expense was my phone bill. I switched over to T-Mobile for this trip because I couldn't find any American carrier plan that was nearly as cheap for my 70-day trip. A lot of the carriers charge $10 per day extra, which would have ran my pockets. T-Mobile's international plan costs just $50 per 30 days, so I just went with 3 of those. I was allotted 15 gigs of high-speed data per 30 days, and I typically use between 6 and 7 gigs. I don't really use social media on my phone that much, so that was really just for maps and to Google stuff. I opted not to get local SIM cards because you need to get a new SIM card in each country that you visit, and I was legit in Slovakia for just a day trip, so it would have just been a nuisance. In total, the phone plan cost me $162 with tax. The next other category was alcohol. In total, I spent $167 on drinking. I'm not a huge drinker, but there are certain places where clubbing is almost part of the experience, such as Budapest or Berlin. In general, for me, I was just too tired to drink at the end of the night after a long day of sightseeing. But I met plenty of people that went out or went clubbing literally every single day. So you're probably gonna fall somewhere on that spectrum of not drinking at all to drinking a lot. But just note, it will get expensive if you're drinking and going out every night. Finally, I spent $44 on laundry. I did my laundry 9 times over the course of my 10-week trip, 4 times at Airbnbs, which was free, and 5 times at laundromats. So on average, it cost me about 8 euros to do my laundry. Altogether, the other category added another $637 or 590 euros. All right, now for the moment that you've all been waiting for. In total, I spent, drum roll please, $6,741 or 6,244 euros, which comes out to $96.30 or 89 euros and 20 cents per day. If you eat as much as I do or want to see as much as I saw, I think this is as cheap as you can do it. But obviously, if you cook your own food more or cut other costs like alcohol or excursions, you could save a bit more. Lastly, I wanted to talk about how I managed to save up the necessary funds for this adventure. When I got my first job at 15, I started setting aside money specifically for this trip. And over the years, I worked every summer. I worked TA jobs and other jobs while I was at school, and last summer, I landed a solid corporate internship. Although I initially budgeted $15,000 for my entire trip, I soon realized that I could spend much less with some thrifty choices. So with that extra money, I'm planning on going to Costa Rica at the end of June for a month, and I'm gonna make a bunch of vlogs from that. And I've been doing vlogs of my entire trip thus far, so subscribe to my channel for that.